jury is present and seated. Everyone else may be seated this time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome back. Hope everyone had a nice lunch. We're going to pick up where we left. Well, first let me ask. We are going to pick up where we left off, but first let me ask. Did anyone have any exposure to this case outside of the courtroom? Do any research relating to the case or discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else? If your answer is yes to any of those questions, please raise your hand at this time. Let the record reflect there are no hands. Again, thank you all very much. State, you may call your next witness.
Kimberly Sutton.
Ms. Sutton, good afternoon and welcome. If you'll please raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you swear any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. If you'll follow the bailiff around to the ramp that leads up to the witness chair, please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. That microphone does adjust.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Kimberly, last name is Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N.
Thank you. Are you employed?
Yes, ma'am.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the DNA section.
How long have you been employed in that capacity?
14 years.
Tell us a little bit about your educational background that you have for that position.
I have a degree in biology, work in biochemistry, statistics, molecular biology, as well as genetics.
And tell us about your training with FDLE following beginning your employment there.
Well, I've been working with FDLE for 16 years now. The first 2 years of employment, I held the position of a forensic technologist. As a technologist, my duties were to provide any type of support I could to the laboratory, as well as to any case-working analysts on the bench. During that time, my duties were to prepare the reagents necessary for the DNA testing process, as well as to help maintain the instruments used in the DNA testing process. As a forensic technologist, I was also able to undergo serology training. Serology is the identification of body fluids, blood, semen, and saliva. That training included papers that talked about the types of tests that I'd be performing, training samples, which allowed me to become familiar with observing all these different types of biological fluids on many different types of evidence. Anything from clothing, guns, knives, bedding. And then after that training, I also completed a competency exam. That exam was administered to me by my trainer. It included a case scenario and some samples. Based on that case scenario, I had to perform the serological testing on the samples that I was given and report those findings back to my trainer. After successfully completing the serology, I was then able to start working actual evidence and actual casework under the supervision of 3 to 4 different DNA analysts during that time. After 2 years as a forensic technologist, I was then promoted to a DNA analyst trainee. That training was approximately a year. It was specifically in DNA. And again, that training also included readings that talked about the types of tests that I'd be performing. It also included training in samples. However, this type of training included me processing samples that have already been identified having biological fluids through the DNA testing process so that I could develop a DNA profile. After that training, there was a completion of an oral as well as a written exam. And since 2006, I have been an independent analyst on the bench.
Okay, so you told us about some specialized training that you had as it pertains to serology, and I believe that also includes specialized training as it pertains to DNA analysis.
Correct.
Okay. Are you also required as a part of your employment to stay up to date in continuing education in the field?
Yes, I'm required to have 8 hours of continuing education each year, but also as a section we do route literature quite frequently that discusses anything that has to do with DNA testing, whether it's types of extractions, mixtures, statistics, anything that deals with in our field.
So you also stay up to date in relevant literature in the area?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you also take part in proficiency testing?
Yes, as an analyst, I'm required to have 2 proficiency tests completed each year. And basically the proficiency test is administered to our laboratory from an outside agency. No one in our laboratory knows what those results are going to be, and we don't know what to expect as far as results from them. So each analyst will be administered one. It comes with a case scenario and samples. Based on the scenario that you're given, you perform the tests that you feel are necessary and report those findings back to that outside agency. That agency then gets back with our supervisor and reports their findings, whether we have passed or not, and whether the results that I reported are consistent with what they were expecting.
Tell us a little bit about your duties and responsibilities on a day-to-day basis as a crime laboratory analyst in the biology section.
Daily duties include screening items of evidence, looking for blood, semen, or saliva, sometimes touch. Once those are screened, I then perform the DNA testing on them, examine the information, create a report. That report is then distributed throughout the section in a review process. And then after that, evidence is packaged up and returned back to the evidence section for the agency to pick up.
Have you previously testified in court regarding your work in the area of DNA analysis?
Yes, I have.
And have you previously been qualified as an expert in that area?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, this time I would ask if the defense has any questions in this area before proceeding.
No, sir.
All right, you may proceed.
You've told us a little bit about serology and that it is a test for bodily fluids, blood, semen, and saliva. Tell us, is that typically the first step prior to DNA testing?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so tell us, what is DNA?
DNA is the genetic information that each individual inherits from their parents, half coming from the mother and the other half from their father. DNA can be found throughout the body in our blood, tissue, hair, bones, teeth, as well as in semen, saliva, and blood. Approximately 99% of everyone's DNA is the same, which is why we all have one head, 2 arms, and 2 legs. However, there is that 1% of DNA that is unique to each individual. And when I'm developing a DNA profile, I'm looking at a very small portion of that 1% of DNA.
Is DNA testing and the type that you do something that only is done in criminal courtrooms?
No. DNA testing is actually very widespread. It's conducted in ancestry, as we've seen with genealogy tests, with people wanting to know where their backgrounds are from, agriculture, medical research, identifying deceased victims, such as the World Trade Center.
Is it accurate to say that the DNA analysis that you perform at FDLE is a worldwide recognized science?
Yes, it is.
And specifically, what type of DNA analysis do you perform?
The type of analysis I perform is called short tandem repeat, or for easier term, STR testing. It's a very highly regarded technique in the forensic community. Essentially, it's a piece of DNA that has a repetitive pattern seen to it. It's highly regarded in the community based on the fact that it's small size, based on the fact that we are able to work with such limited amount of information, as well as its high power of discrimination.
Is it essentially that less than 1% of people that differs, that is what you're looking at when you do this STR testing?
A small portion of that 1%, yes.
And exactly how many areas is it that FDLE is looking at of that small portion?
For this case, there were 15 areas that I looked at in order to develop a DNA profile.
Can you explain briefly the process of how it is that you isolate these 15 areas to do your analysis?
Sure. Just for ease of explanation, let's say if I have a blood stain on a swab, I'm going to take a small cutting of that swab, place it into a tube with liquid, and apply heat to it. What this is doing is it's just releasing any nuclear or DNA information from that swab into the solution. After it's in the solution, then we have a process where we can have an estimate of approximately how much DNA is present in that solution. Once we do have an idea of how much we are working with, we're able to go in and make exact millions of copies of what's present. So we're taking what's limited and making a lot more of it. And the reason for that is the final process of the DNA method is putting it through an instrument that will read that information to me and display it on a graph.
Okay. Is how much DNA may be present on an item going to affect your testing?
Absolutely.
Explain how that might be.
If an item has an enormous amount of DNA present, it's going to blow out my sample and I won't have anything to look at. I'll have to go back and actually dilute it because there's just too much information that it's overloaded. And then there's the other side of the spectrum where if it's very limited, that will show either with no DNA being present or with low amounts.
So just because an item may actually show that it has DNA on it, it doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to perform an analysis or a comparison. Is that accurate?
It means that I may not always have something to interpret.
Okay. You may not have enough information there to interpret.
Correct.
I want to turn your attention to FDLE case number 2015-01-02-174. Were you involved in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And from a biology perspective, in the biology section, how many items of evidence or how many submissions were there?
There were 2 submissions.
And when is it that you became involved in this case?
Is it okay if I check my file to
If
see?
it'll help refresh your recollection.
It looks like August 27th of 2015 was when the first submission of evidence came in.
Okay. And explain what is the procedure at the lab for items of evidence coming into your lab?
We have an evidence section at FDLE. This section is only open to few select individuals who have access to that particular section. That section is where agencies will come and drop off their evidence to us. No evidence comes directly to any analyst. Everything goes to the evidence section. At the evidence section, they will take in information as far as what agency, what individual is dropping off the information or the item of evidence, what day it is, what particular evidence are they dropping off, and for what analysis. Is it DNA? Is it fingerprints? Firearms? And so all of that information is tracked in our system. And then each section has individual spaces in the evidence, whether it can be on a shelf, in a freezer, or in a fridge for the evidence.
The 2 submissions that you received in this case, did you retrieve them from those locations that you've described?
From the evidence section, yes.
The evidence section. And were they all properly packaged, labeled, and sealed?
Yes, they were.
And you said that you first began your work in this case, or first received items in August of 2015. Tell us what was contained in that first submission that you received.
In the first submission, there were buccal swabs from Nicole Nachtman, left and right hand fingernail clippings from Marianne Diaz, a blood stain card from Robert Dinez, a blood card from Miriam Dinez, swabs from the kitchen floor at marker 1, swabs from a refrigerator, and swabs from the hallway wall.
Okay. And these individual items that you received, you've talked about some blood cards, some buccal swabs, and then some swabs from various locations. Do you treat different items differently, such as the ones we've described here, and why?
Yes. Buccal swabs are swabs that are taken from a known individual. They are also known as a reference standard. They will be used as comparison to any items of evidence in the case. The same goes for a blood stain card. That sample comes directly from an individual and is known as a reference standard, and that also will be used as in comparison to any question profiles in the case. Question samples and known samples are processed separately in our laboratory, and for that main sole purpose is that to keep them separate.
And so you said they're processed separately at your laboratory. Are steps taken to ensure that there's no cross-contamination?
Yes, ma'am. When an item of evidence is opened, we have workbenches that are cleaned prior to opening any evidence. We have what's known as butcher paper. It's basically this durable paper that is placed down before any item of evidence is opened. We have lab coats, gloves, face masks, all that to help protect us from contaminating any particular items of evidence as well.
Okay, so let's start first with the buccal swabs from Nicole Nachtman. What did you do with this item of evidence?
With this item of evidence, I checked it out from the evidence vault, went to my work queue, cleaned my workspace, made sure I had the appropriate utensils that I needed for the testing process, and began taking notes. I'm going to want to know how the item of evidence or the package is maintained, what information is on there, and I want to be sure that the information on the package is consistent with what I'm expecting from my case tracking form. Once I open it, I then examine it and note in my notes everything that I see.
Okay. And then going forward, would this have been a standard, as you mentioned before, a reference standard that you would have used going forward for any testing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Let's talk about the blood cards from Robert Deans and the blood card from Miriam Deans. Tell us what you did with those items.
For those items, again, I treated them as a known standard. And the same thing. Once I checked that out, I took the evidence to a cleaned work area and looked at the information from the package, compared it to what is on the case tracking form to ensure that it was the correct package, and then began taking notes once the item was opened.
And I'm approaching you with what's already been introduced, the State's Exhibit number 72. If you could take a look at that item and the item inside and let me know if you recognize that to be the blood card that you received in this case from Robert Deans, or as represented from me from Robert Deans.
Yes, and the way that I can tell is from here's our F-Daily barcode label. It contains our case number as well as the agency's case number. And then here as well is where I wrote the case number, date, and initials as to the date that I opened it.
Okay, you can put that down. I want to talk now about the left and right hand fingernail clippings from Miriam Deans. What did you do with those items?
For the fingernail clippings, what I received was a package with some nail clippings in them. What I then do is take a sterile swab and add some water to that and then swab the fingernails. So what I'm trying to do is pick up any DNA cells that could be on those nails and then begin processing that through DNA testing.
Okay, and what was the results of your testing in that?
For the fingernails, a complete profile was obtained from the left-hand fingernails from Miriam Dinez. Nothing foreign was obtained.
Okay, so in other words, you obtained a complete DNA profile, but is it assumed that it is in fact Miriam Dean's fingernails since they're represented as being from her body?
Correct. The term foreign means something that's different or unique from that individual. Since I did have her stain card as a reference and I ran her fingernails, I was able to compare the profile I got from her fingernails to the profile from her known standard. Nothing was different, therefore nothing foreign was obtained from her fingernail swabs.
Okay, and what about the left hand?
The left hand was the same. A complete profile was obtained and nothing foreign was found.
Okay, moving on now to the swabs that you received. And I want to ask you this, on the swabs, these would be, is it accurate to say these are something different than reference standards?
Yes, these are known as question samples.
Okay. When you first receive swabs that are represented as being from a crime scene, and they're sort of believed to be question samples that you don't know, do you perform serology on those first prior to DNA analysis?
Yes, and all that depends on the actual item of evidence themselves.
Okay.
If there's red-brown staining, then I'm going to perform a chemical test to see if there is possible blood. If there were yellow staining, I would perform a test to see if there was semen present. So it just depends on the fluid or biological staining that's present.
All right, so let's talk first about the swab from the refrigerator. What did that swab look like to you? What did you describe its appearance and what do you recall of it? While you're looking that up, I'm going to approach you with State's Exhibit number 60. You can take a look inside that.
And which swab was this?
The swab from the refrigerator. Yes, ma'am.
Once I opened that package, I had 2 swabs with red-brown staining.
Okay, and if you could take a look at State's Exhibit number 60 that I just handed you.
Okay.
Do you recognize that?
Yes. Again, here's our F-Daily barcode and the information that I wrote on the package on the day that I opened it.
Do you recognize that to be the swab from the refrigerator?
Yes.
Okay. So you said that there was red-brown staining. So based on that, what did you do?
I performed a chemical change test, which is what I would normally perform on any red-brown staining that's observed. This test basically just gives the indication if blood could be present.
And what was the result of that chemical test to determine if blood is present?
Positive.
After receiving a positive indication for the presence of blood on that swab, what did you do next?
I proceeded with taking a cutting of that red-brown stain and started the DNA testing on that.
Okay. And when you moved it on to the DNA testing portion of it, what was the results of that testing?
The results for the refrigerator. A complete profile was obtained, and that profile matched the profile from Robert Dinez.
You said it was a complete profile that matched Robert Dinez, or Robert Deans is
Deans.
the name that we know. Did you determine whether or not there was any mixture observed, whether there was the presence of any other profile?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And in performing this testing and the further testing that we're going to talk about, did you utilize all of the methods and procedures that you've previously described to us regarding STR testing to perform this analysis?
Yes, I did.
All right, I'm showing you now State's Exhibit number 59. You could take a look at that item and let us know if you recognize that.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and how do you recognize that to be what?
This will be the swab from the kitchen floor. And again, here's our FDLE case number, or FDLE label, and then the information I wrote once I opened the package.
Okay, tell us what you did with that item and what you observed of it.
With the kitchen floor, I also had 2 swabs with red-brown staining.
Okay, so based on seeing that red-brown staining, what did you do?
I tested it for the presence of the possibility of blood, and that was positive. And then that sample was also, a sample was taken from it and carried through the DNA testing process.
Okay, and tell us about the DNA testing on that sample.
Okay, the profile from the kitchen floor demonstrated the presence of a mixture of at least 2 individuals. A complete DNA profile for the major contributor could be determined, and that major profile matched Robert Deans.
Okay, so on the swab from the kitchen floor, you saw a profile that was a mixture of 2 individuals. Is that correct? At least 2.
Correct.
Okay, and I believe you said that you saw a complete profile for Robert Deans.
As the major, yes.
Okay. Were you able to make any determinations as to the second possible contributor?
There was no interpretation or conclusion that I could come to for the second contributor. There was just not enough information for that individual.
Okay, so going back to what you told us about earlier, where even though you can tell that there might be DNA on something, you're not always able to determine the source of it because it could be too low of a level to interpret. Is that accurate?
Yes. Also with mixtures, you tend to have, or you can have, one individual that is present much more in quantity than the other person, and that just is the case in this particular sample.
Okay, so where the major contributor is perhaps covering the ability to determine the minor contributor.
Masking is also a possibility.
Term for it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to show you now State's Exhibit number 61, and I should ask, before I move to 61, is it accurate then to say that State's Exhibit 59 and 60, which you said were complete profiles and matches to Robert Deans, that they then matched the DNA you obtained from State's Exhibit 72, the bloodstain card?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to State's Exhibit 61, the swab from the hallway wall. Tell us about your observations on this.
For this particular swab, when I opened the evidence, there was only 1 swab, and I have noted that it had a very small red-brown stain.
Okay, very small red-brown stain, smaller than what you observed of the other 2 swabs?
Small enough that I felt it necessary to note in my notes.
Okay, small enough, necessary to note it was very small?
Yes.
Okay. Based on seeing that very small red-brown stain, what did you do?
Same thing. Took a cutting of the sample and began the processing it through DNA testing.
Okay, and first, before we go on to DNA testing, did you do a chemical indication of a presumptive test on that red-brown stain?
Yes, I did test the red-brown stain for the indication of blood, and that was positive. And then I took a cutting of it and processed it through DNA.
Okay, and tell us about the results of the processing of it for DNA.
For the hallway swab, limited information was obtained from that.
Too limited to interpret it?
Correct. No inclusions, no exclusions. No information can be taken from that information.
You just didn't have enough information available?
Correct.
Okay. So you're able to say that it's blood, but you're not able to tell us who it could potentially, what profile could potentially match to, if any.
Well, our test is not confirmatory, so I cannot say for sure that it is blood. However, my expertise with the red-brown staining and the positive indication for blood, I believe that was a blood stain.
Okay. Just not a high enough threshold to go forward to DNA.
Correct, due to its small size.
Okay. After doing that testing on the hallway wall swab and having that information, did that conclude your testing on all of the items in submission number 1?
Yes, it did.
Okay. So what was your next contact with this case?
Before we go on to that, Nez, let me have the attorney's approach.
Your next contact with this case after you finished all of the testing in submission number 1?
September 27th of 2017, I had the second submission come into our laboratory.
And what was contained in the second submission?
Cutting of a drywall.
Take all these back. You could, and you kind of have to keep it upright and be careful, but if you could take a look at that item for me and the packaging on it and let me know if you recognize that to be the cutting of the drywall that you received in submission number 2.
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
You see your markings on it to indicate you received that?
Yes, here is our FDA label, and then my information is to the day that I opened the actual item of evidence.
Ms.
Okay.
Gary, could we also put the exhibit number? I don't know that we...
I'm sorry, exhibit number 31, State's Exhibit 31. I apologize. And if you could, describe to us what you observed when you opened this exhibit, what you saw on this cutting of drywall.
In this particular item, I described it as an apparent drywall, light blue in color with prints.
With what? I'm sorry?
With prints.
With prints.
Yes.
Prints meaning fingerprints?
Yes.
Okay, now obviously you're not a fingerprint expert, correct?
Correct.
But it was the appearance to you, similar to when you described like a red-brown stain, you observed what appeared to be a print.
Yes.
But you said that this was not red-brown, it was light blue, is that correct?
Light blue, correct.
Are you familiar with having previously seen items of evidence that have that same light blue color surrounding like what appears to be a print?
Yes, ma'am.
And in your training and experience, what do you know that to be or possibly be?
It's one or two, it's possibly some type of material that's used maybe for the prints, or something that they used possibly to test for blood prior to coming into the laboratory. I don't know exactly what that light blue color is from, but I could tell that it was already tested.
Okay, so could tell that it was already tested, meaning that that light blue had been placed on that print to attempt to test it for something.
Yes.
All right. Are you familiar with amido black?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and tell us what that is.
It's just a chemical that they use when they're trying to develop fingerprints. From what I do understand of it, and I don't know too much about it, is that it's something...
Objection to speculation.
I'll sustain. I'll caution the witness not to speculate.
Okay.
Without speculating, you said what you do know of it.
Is that it can inhibit the DNA testing process.
Okay. What did you do with this item of evidence, this cutting?
With this piece of drywall, I swabbed a portion of one of the fingerprints.
A portion of one of the fingerprints that was in that blue material you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And based on that swabbing, what did you then do with that?
I simply took a cutting of that sample, placed it into the tube, began the DNA extraction process, and analyzed my information from it.
Did you attempt to test that cutting that you took or the swab that you took from the blue? Did you attempt to test that for the presence of blood?
No, ma'am.
Why not?
There was no red-brown staining that would indicate to me that I think that could be blood.
And is that sort of something that is a part of your training and procedures that you follow? You're only going to test something for the presence of blood if it appears it could contain it.
Yes, ma'am.
The fact that you saw this blue tint on this print, did it give you the appearance that if there had been blood there, it's probably gone now?
Correct.
So after taking a cutting of that swab that you took from the blue print, and then I believe you said you then went on and attempted to do DNA testing.
Yes.
What was the results of that testing?
This gave limited information that, again, I could make no inclusion, no exclusion, no interpretations to it.
In your experience, putting that blue substance on top of, anything, is that going to affect the ability to do DNA testing on it?
Yes. Again, from what I do understand of it, it's something to do with the chemical makeup of it. It does interrupt the DNA testing process.
And can affect the ability to retain any DNA if it had even been there?
It can help, it can degrade it, it can prevent me from being able to develop it.
If you are given a scenario where you have what appears to be a fingerprint in blood, a bloody fingerprint, as either a DNA analyst or in your experience as a forensic technologist, is it going to always be possible to test for both the blood and the print, or is it accurate to say that one may affect the other?
Each case is different. If you have blood, but you also have a print, as my expertise on the bench, I always call an analyst from the fingerprint section to make that determination. If they say, no, it's okay, you won't disturb the print, I can go ahead and sample from that item of evidence. However, it's not always the case. Sometimes we call the detective and say, listen, we have a good chance for either. Which do you prefer? And then a lot of times they leave that up to us to determine which do you think you'll get a better shot at. So yeah, it's not always open just because I see red-brown staining. It's not necessarily something I will be able to sample.
And the fact that you said that you may have to call a detective or have to call the fingerprint section, is it accurate to say that sometimes you have to choose which one you can do because you may not be able to do both?
Correct.
And in this case, are you aware as to whether the swab that you collected from the hallway wall was collected from this cutting of drywall that you received?
From the hallway wall.
Did it indicate that to you in your paperwork, or was it just that it was from the hallway wall?
Well, in the first submission, it's just swab from the hallway wall, and then the second submission is the cutting from the drywall. Yeah.
Judge, may I have one moment?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Cross.
Good afternoon, Ms. Sutton.
Afternoon.
You had indicated kind of when you were explaining what DNA is, I think you mentioned that it's basically the genetic material an individual gets from their mother and their father.
Yes, ma'am.
You also mentioned that part, in addition to the DNA type of analysis that you do or the FDLE does, there's also DNA analysis for medical research, genealogy to learn your background, maybe a medical history, things like that.
Correct.
Now, with regard to the submissions you got in this case, just to kind of recap, the swabs from the kitchen floor were determined to be a mixture.
Okay.
Is that correct?
From the kitchen floor, yes.
One, you were able to identify the major contributor as that being Robert Deans,
Correct.
and unable to determine the minor contributor.
Yes.
And that you had indicated could be for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the major masks the minor. Sometimes there's not enough DNA of the minor present. All of those are possibilities.
Yes.
The swab from the fridge also matched Robert Deans, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the swab from the hallway wall, again, not enough information for you to make a conclusion one way or the other.
Correct.
Now, with regard to this cutting of the drywall that Ms. Derry was just asking you about, you talked about all these possibilities about Blue Star, Amido Black, whatever chemical could have been used. The bottom line is, when you looked at the drywall, you saw no red or brown stain,
No red-brown staining was seen.
indicating to you that there was possibly blood present.
Correct.
Because typically, if you had seen that, you would have then went on to the phenolphthalein test to determine if it was possible blood.
Correct.
So no red, brown, pink, no staining. What you saw was blue.
Correct, ma'am.
And your experience from seeing this blue color or this blue substance is it could have been a chemical that crime scene technicians used to try and lift a print, but again, you weren't there, so you don't know.
Correct.
The other thing you mentioned is, in Florida Department of Law Enforcement, you all can talk amongst each other, let's say the latent print examiners, where you may discuss, hey, what is the method we should use, or what should we try to do first? Should we try and get a print, or should we try and get DNA?
Correct.
That didn't happen in this case because your print department was not involved in this case as far as you could see from your case file?
I didn't contact them because I was only asked to swab it.
Okay, so there was no discussion among a print examiner and yourself, whether it be from the sheriff's office or FDLE, to discuss what would have been better to obtain?
No, ma'am.
The bottom line is all you saw was something that looked blue, some type of chemical, and evidence of a print on the drywall.
Correct.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Ms. Sutton.
Any redirect?
No regret.
May this witness be excused by the state
Yes, sir.
and by the defense?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. You may be excused as a witness at this time. Ms. Holt, are we ready on that other witness?
Judge, I believe we are, as long as someone can come help me with the technology.
All right, I just need to instruct the jury briefly before we do that. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you may recall from the instructions that I gave you at the beginning of the trial that the state presents its case first and calls all of its witnesses. Then when they rest, the defense calls their witnesses and presents its case. Occasionally, in order to accommodate schedules, things come up where we may have to call a witness out of order. This next witness is a defense witness. This witness will also be testifying via Skype, so that's what they are setting up now. I am instructing you that you are not to consider this witness's testimony any differently than any other witness's testimony, and in evaluating the witness's testimony, not to do that any differently simply because they're called out of order.
And who was your actual roommate?
My roommate was Nicole Nachtman.
And what were the names of your suite mates?
Anna and Sabina.
And how was the setup in your actual bedroom where you and Nicole Nachtman shared the room?
Our room originally were bunk beds, and I arrived first and debunked the beds. So my room was to the right. My bed was to the right-hand side, and hers was to the left, 2 feet apart from one another.
Okay, and you already indicated that your family helped you move in. Did they help you separate the bunk beds?
Yes, they did.
Okay, and you indicated that they were about 2 feet apart from each other then at that point once you put them both on the ground?
Yes, a rug divided our rooms, our beds.
And what was the setup with your suite mates? Did they do the same thing or something different?
No, they actually knew each other beforehand, so they chose to have their beds in bunk beds.
And do you recall when Nicole Nachtman actually moved in the fall?
Yes, I actually didn't know her, so it was a random roommate match, and so she moved in by herself.
Okay, and when you say she moved in by herself, what are you really saying to us here today?
There were no parents to help her move in any of her luggage or any of her clothes. It was just herself carrying everything through the elevator to the 4th floor that we lived on.
And did your family or yourself, did you all assist Nicole Nachtman in moving in her things from any particular area?
Yes, we offered to hold the elevator for her and just move her clothes from the common area into the bedroom so that she could get organized.
And do you recall here in 2019 how her belongings and how her clothes were packaged or anything of that sort?
Her clothes were in luggages and some were in bags. It was pretty normal.
During the fall of 2014 and the spring of 2015, did you ever have occasion to meet the parents of Nicole Nachtman?
No, I never met her parents. They never went to visit her in the year that we lived together.
Did you ever have occasion to meet any sibling that she might have had?
No, I didn't have the opportunity.
Any occasion to meet any family members that Nicole Nachtman might have had in 2014 or 2015?
No, I did not meet any member of her family.
Do you recall whether or not Nicole Nachtman had a car during the fall of 2014 and the spring of 2015?
Yes, I believe she had a car because that's where she brought all her stuff in when we moved in.
And did you ever...
Let me close the door.
Okay. And just to make clear what happened, you're at home where you have a young child, is that correct?
Yes, and she's crying downstairs.
Okay. Okay, and you have a babysitter. She's not downstairs by herself, correct?
Yes, she has a
Okay.
babysitter.
All right, thank you. Did you ever see Nicole Nachtman's car at all?
No, I do not know what car she drove.
And I think you indicated earlier that your suite mates knew each other, but the assignment of you and Nicole to a particular room, that was random, so you really didn't know each other, correct?
No, we didn't know each other and we didn't get in contact beforehand. I know the school provided maybe an email that we could reach out to our roommate, but I never did, and we just met the first day we moved in.
And Ms. Nachman did not reach out to you either, is that correct?
No.
Okay. If you could, go through what your physical observations were of Ms. Nachman.
For me, she kind of looked like a mess. There was things everywhere, and so she had a lot of layers of clothing, and she was very flustered. I guess kind of overwhelming moving yourself in by yourself. So I would expect her, she was just out of breath, and it was just so much going on. There was a lot of commotion for her.
Did you make any observations of her hygiene or of her demeanor in some way?
She didn't seem so clean. She had a scent to her, but later on I would learn why that was. I just didn't say anything because I had just met her and I didn't want to make the situation uncomfortable.
Did you make any observations of how much clothing she had, how many shoes she might have, anything of that sort?
I know that she only wore one pair of shoes the entire fall and spring semester, and she did have clothes that filled up the 2 drawers that she had in her half of the closet, so she did have enough clothing, just one pair of shoes.
Did you make any notation or any observations of how Ms. Nachman put her bed together or anything of that sort?
So Nicole did not have bed sheets or like a pillowcase on her bed. She pretty much just laid on the basic blue mat that we were given. And so in comparison to me, I brought like a cushion to make it more comfortable and different sheets and pillows. She didn't have anything. And so that's how she slept, just on the bare mattress.
Over the both the fall and the spring, while you were roommates with Nicole Nachtman, could you give us some of your observations of how the room physically looked over time?
So over time, the room would be really messy on her side. And so there was just note cards everywhere, her computer's just laying out, her backpack, clothes. It was just very, very messy. And so therefore, it became like confrontational between us both because I wanted the room to be clean and she would never clean it. So it was very hard to live with someone that didn't want to clean their side of the room.
And did when you say not wanting to clean, was it something more than just messy?
I never saw her have like a vacuum or a towel wipe to wipe down the bare mattress. There was nothing that indicated other than, okay, I can pick up a few things, but it was never like cleaning or passing at least a rag on something.
And would she use a garbage can or a wastebasket appropriately?
I don't believe so. I think we had one in the room that I provided, and so she had garbage bags, if anything, to put things in the garbage bag.
And what did you observe over the fall and the spring while you were roommates in terms of Nicole Nachtman's pattern of going to classes?
So Nicole to me was nocturnal. She would sleep during the day when we had classes and be up all night on her 2 laptops. So I didn't see her as much. It could be because we were different grade levels. I was a freshman and she, I believe, was a junior when we moved in together. So I never saw her. I saw her maybe once, and it was in a hall. It was in a bathroom of a building that she was sleeping in, and I told her, why are you sleeping here? Our room is literally 10 minutes away. And she just said she wanted to take a quick nap, and that was her choice, and I left her alone.
Okay, so what you're describing is that you walked into a bathroom in a hall that was separate from where you lived. Is that correct?
Yes, it was like in big classroom buildings, and so in there's common restrooms that anybody can walk into. And when I walked in, she was just in there laying down with her head on her backpack, and I told her, why aren't you in our room? Our room is a 10-minute walk. You can take a comfortable nap there. And she just said that she wanted to take a quick nap, I guess in between classrooms.
And she was literally laying on the floor of the bathroom?
Yes.
And do those buildings with classrooms have study hall rooms in them or empty rooms?
Not that I know of. I know the library did, and our hall, Sally Hall, had rooms that we could study in.
Did you make observations of Nicole Nachtman as it related to sleeping in other locations other than your room and the bathroom that you've described?
Yes, actually there was an occasion that one of my best friends saw her in our hall. Sally Hall. It was 2 study rooms.
Okay, hold on. Let me have the witness hold on one second.
Miss-
It's all right. What's the legal basis for the
The
objection?
objection is it's beyond the scope of her knowledge. It's something someone else observed.
I'll also state I'll caution the witness not to testify to things that you don't have personal knowledge of that someone else told you.
Ms. Eisenman, did you yourself observe Ms. Nachman in a study hall sleeping at some time, at some point? So just in the bathroom?
Yes.
Okay. During the time period that you were roommates with Ms. Nachman, did you ever meet anyone that was a friend of hers?
I never met anyone, but I know that she had a best friend that she would talk to me about. They shared like necklaces, and some nights she didn't sleep in our dorm room, and she would tell me that she was with that friend.
Okay. And does the name Laura sound familiar to you at all?
Yes, that is her friend.
Okay. Did she ever bring anyone to your room or to your common area at all, whether to study with them or just to chat with them or anything of that sort?
No, she never brought anybody around.
And when you indicated that Ms. Nachman would be on her computer at night, tell the jury how that interplayed with you while you were trying to sleep in your room.
So I found it very weird and strange. I kind of felt like somebody was watching me as I slept, and that's very creepy for me. I know that she had 2 different laptops, and she would tell me that one was for school and the other one was for entertainment with her games on Tumblr. And so there were many nights when she would have her headphones in and she would talk, and I would assume that she was talking to someone, but I don't know if she was talking to herself. And so I felt really uncomfortable that I asked Florida State if I could be moved out of the dorm 3 times, and on the 3 occasions they told me I was denied for moving into another hall.
And did you have to take any type of sleep aids or anything of that sort to get you through the night?
Sometimes I would take ZQL just to sleep it through. If I knew I had an important exam and I didn't want to feel weird, I would just take a ZQL and I would go to sleep and it would be fine.
And did you attempt to talk to Ms. Nachman about that you were trying to sleep while she was, whether she was talking to somebody or talking to herself and on the computers? Did you try to talk to Ms. Nachman about it?
Yeah, on certain occasions I did, but towards the end I kind of just gave up. I knew that that was going to be her routine, and so I just did what I needed to do to go to sleep.
And so your conversations with her were not successful in getting her to change, is that correct?
No, she wasn't very confrontational, so it was very hard for us to get to an understanding as roommates. But she just would do it maybe one night, and then by the next week it was back to her old routine.
Did you have any mirrors that were in your room or in the bathroom area, the common area, anything of that sort?
Yes, we had one mirror on my side of the room, and then we had one mirror in our bathroom.
And did you ever make an observation on how Ms. Nachman reacted in terms of mirrors?
She was always in a rush to get ready. She would get ready, put on her layers of clothes. I mean, she would never look in the mirror that was on my side of the room, and in the bathroom, I never saw her look into the mirror either. It was very like 1, 2, 3, get ready, and then jot out the door.
And you indicated that she would put on layers of clothes. Did you find that to be unusual?
Yes, definitely living in Florida where it's like 95 degrees and it's really hot to have 3 layers of clothing and on the bottom and on the top, plus like a purse and backpack. I just thought it was very strange if you're walking around all of campus trying to get to the different classes.
Did you and Nicole have occasion to talk about her relationship with her mother?
Yes, eventually we got to know each other more and we would share things about our family. I know that her relationship with her mom and stepdad were not very well, and she also told me she had 2 brothers.
All right, approach.
I decided when I'm back. Are you there?
Yes.
All right. Now, did you and Nicole talk about the major that she had, that she was taking at FSU?
Yeah, she told me that she was taking public relations with a minor in history.
And did she tell you that she had to change her major?
Yeah, she told me that she wanted to be a history major, but her mom told her that she couldn't be a history major, that there was no, I guess, career path in that major, and so she had to switch to public relations.
And did Ms. Nachman talk to you about having had plastic surgery, specifically liposuction, because of being body shamed by her mother?
Yes, she did tell me about her plastic surgery, and therefore that's why she had to wear like tight pantyhose to keep everything together.
Because that had occurred in close proximity to her going to school?
Excuse me?
Was that because because that had happened in close proximity to her going to school then in 2014, or do you know? And if you don't know, please don't guess.
I don't know the dates of when.
Did she also talk to you about changing her grades and the reason why she was changing her grades?
Yes. So when she was doing good in school, I know that she would have to change her grades herself or try to figure it out. One time she was like really freaking out because her mom wanted a report saying what her grades were. And so she was calling her, asking her, and she was trying to figure out how to change. I think it was a C to a B or some minor change, but she needed to change her grades.
And did Ms. Nachman talk to you about her relationship with her mother in terms of how she felt towards her mother?
I know that she felt very controlled by her mother. They didn't have the best relationship. The few times that I would hear them on the phone, it was very argumentative. I would always step out of the room because I didn't feel comfortable to listen to somebody else's phone call. But it was more very timid. She wouldn't answer back, and I would just hear her mom. And so our walls weren't that thick, and I would just go to the common area. And it wasn't the way that me and my mom were speaking to one another. So that's the comparison I have.
And was it your impression that Ms. Nachman feared repercussions from her mother based on perhaps failures that she had going on in school?
Yes, I know that she was very scared not to be successful in her grades or anything, so she would try to make sure to do her best, but sometimes, her outcomes were short.
And during the time periods that y'all were in school together and roommates together, whenever holidays would come up like Christmas or Thanksgiving or spring break, what was your impression of Nicole in terms of returning home for those time periods?
I know that she wasn't really excited to go home because her mom would want her to be someone that she isn't. Done or do her hair, and that's not really who she was, dressed differently. And so, and we wanted to go home and rush to go home, try to get our exams done early. She would wait till the last possible minute to leave because our dormitories would lock after a certain time for all holiday breaks.
Okay. I was going to ask you that. Was there an option of staying behind in the dorm, or were all students basically locked out of the dorms for the downtime?
All students had to leave the premises.
You indicated that your observations of Nicole over a period of time, as well as the way she kept her room, so how she kept herself and how she kept her room, do you think that those two things deteriorated with time?
I think it was pretty steady. Right? From the beginning she was messy, and at the end she was messy. I don't think there was a change in her way of keeping her side of the room. It was pretty much the same from the beginning and to the end.
You indicated that there was an odor about Ms. Nachman that you would find out later why that was. Could you tell me what your observations were about what you think was causing the problem with Ms. Nachman's hygiene?
So Nicole wouldn't shower as often as once a day. I mean, she would shower every other day or would go more than that. So therefore, her clothes had a certain smell to it. And I didn't really see her shower as much as I would. And that's why the smell really came into our room, and I had to put scents, or for instance, cinnamon sticks I had to do as well, just to get the scent away because she was not showering.
Did you, in fact, literally confront Ms. Nachman about herself, her hygiene, and the way she kept her room?
Yes, there was a point where we got into a confrontation, and I wasn't the nicest about it. I told her that I was over just her not being clean and the room constantly smelling bad. And so I know that at that moment I made her cry, and I felt really bad because I knew that she wasn't a person of confrontation, but I had to say what I needed to say because it had been months living together and nothing was getting better.
And you indicated that you described Ms. Nachman as timid. What was your impression of how Ms. Nachman was conducting herself, being an upperclassman at FSU? I mean, was she acting responsible towards her classes and towards herself and things of that sort?
No, I don't believe she was. She had a really serious obsession with Elsa, the Disney character. And I, as a 21-year-old, I don't think that that's something that I would be obsessed with, as to dye my hair, buy magazines, coloring book, purse, makeup of a Disney character. I just think that that wasn't age appropriate at that point.
And what you're talking about, the obsession with Elsa and the movie, did you see an obsession with the movie Frozen?
Yes, that is the movie.
And was this obsession limited to, for instance, around Halloween, or was it an obsession that was ongoing?
It was an ongoing obsession. I know that she received private sewing lessons to sew the costume, the blue costume of Elsa. I know that she ordered specific shoes. I know it was around the time of Halloween, but it continued. There was literally Elsa everything, pens, purse, anything you could find Elsa, Nicole had.
Did you have occasion while you and Nicole were either in the shared areas or in your room, did you ever see her show that same type of obsession and or interest in any of her classwork at all?
To be honest, not really. I never saw her study as much as me or my other two roommates were studying. She never sat down really in the common area to hours studying. I never saw her really have time to study. She was more on her computer doing her games and mostly sleeping during the day that's when I would study, and at night I would study.
And you indicated that you had asked to be moved out of the room with Nicole Nachtman on 3 separate occasions?
Yes, I asked and they denied me, and then my mother went ahead and called the housing department, and they also told her that there was nothing that could be done.
I don't have a moment yet.
Yes.
The Assistant State Attorney will probably have some questions, so hang tight for just a minute, okay? And thank you very much.
Also, let me have the attorneys approach before the cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Ms. Roman.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Miss Derry, and I'm just going to be asking you a few questions, okay?
Okay.
All right. So if I understand things correctly, Ms. Nachtman was a randomly assigned roommate to you, correct?
Yes.
You didn't know her at all before.
No, I did not.
And you indicated that you guys maybe were provided each other's email addresses, but that she never reached out to you, but you also never reached out to her, correct?
Yeah, we never reached out to one another.
Okay. And it seems pretty clear that you and Ms. Nachtman were pretty different people. Is that accurate?
Yes, very different people.
She was into things that you were totally not into.
Not at all.
Okay. And she was into various social media and internet things that it doesn't seem like you were into.
No, I did not have a Tumblr, and I didn't know about how to do any of those accounts. I know that she had several accounts. I know I had social media like Instagram and Twitter, but never something like Tumblr that you could play a virtual world with someone else.
And obviously what she was into, Tumblr and other things where she has this virtual world, it was obviously something that other people were also into, just not you.
Yes.
Okay. And from what we understand, Ms. Nachman was pretty messy, right?
Yes.
And you said you talked to her about it on several occasions, and that she would change for like a day or two, and then go back. Is that right?
Yes, it was always going back to her messy. It was messy from the beginning and messy till the end. Oh, you know.
Okay. And you indicated that Ms. Nachman never studied at all. Is that accurate?
I didn't see her study much. I didn't witness it at all because I would study in the library a lot. I wouldn't do much because, like I said, I felt uncomfortable a lot around her, so I would study in the library.
Okay. And is it fair to say that, you guys are randomly assigned roommates, but you would not consider yourself friends with her during that period, correct?
No, she was not my friend.
And she was not someone that you would have socialized with outside of the dorm?
No, not at all.
Is it accurate to say you didn't like her, right?
No, I did not like her. I had to stand her, kind of.
Like you had to tolerate her?
Yes, that's the correct word. I had to tolerate her because she was my roommate.
Okay. You indicated that at one point your dislike of her became so bad that you actually made her cry when you confronted her. Is that right?
Yes, there was where I confronted her, and so she felt really uncomfortable, and like I said, she wasn't confrontational, and I made her cry, and she stormed out, and I know I didn't need to, but I was really fed up with the point that our room smelled bad, and it was constantly messy.
Ms. Nachman was someone that you would describe as being weird. Is that right?
That's the word that I can describe her as.
Okay. And weird to you because it was something that you were totally not into.
No, I've had so many friends throughout high school, and in college I made friends as well, and it was just someone that she was very into this virtual world. She was by herself a lot and into being connected with people that were on a computer, which that wasn't what I was into. I wanted to meet people. That's why I was in college.
Nothing further. Thank you so much, Ms. Roman.
Just redirect.
Very, very brief. Ms. Eisenman, you initially with Ms. Nachman, you did try to become friends with her. Not friends, but you tried to get to know her a little bit. You tried to see if y'all were going to be able to talk to each other and, at least exist, correct?
Yeah, I wanted to know more about her, and I was assuming she wanted to know more about me, but it never got to the point where we were hanging out or exchanging, text. It was very on a mutual ground. We understood you were my roommate, I was yours, and that was it.
And the two suite mates tried to do the same thing. They tried to create some type of atmosphere where you could exist, correct?
Yes, we all tried to get along as much as possible.
And it wasn't just that Miss Nachman was weird, but you also were troubled by that she seemed to live in a fantasy world rather than interacting with people in school, in the dorm, things like that, correct?
Yeah, our dorm held a lot of activities for us, as it was mostly a freshman hall dorm, and so I never saw her go to any of them. And the only friend I knew about was Laura that she had mentioned. I never met any of her friends. It was very secluded. She was always on her computer, whether it was doing homework if it was, or on her video Tumblr stuff, but I know that she was not talking to many people.
She was an introvert and she was nerdy. Is that how you described her also?
Yeah, she's definitely an introvert.
And did you also describe her as nerdy?
My term of nerdy was doing schoolwork, so I don't know if nerdy means the same as being on virtual world. For me, that's more weird.
And you can point to specific things about the manner in which Ms. Nachman lived that was what made you feel uncomfortable and creepy, and then certainly not even concerned with her hygiene and the room's hygiene, correct?
Yes, there were certain occasions that she would not, like I said, shower, and she would just be with herself on that computer for hours on end. I would wake up from my sleep, and she was still up from the night before.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. We're going to disconnect the connection now. And I'll ask the state to call your next witness. We're going to go a little bit longer before we take our afternoon break.
State call Connie Bell.
Connie Bell. Bell, good afternoon and welcome. If you'll come forward to be sworn wherever you're comfortable. If you'll face me and raise your right hand, please. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. If you'll follow the bailiff around to the ramp that leads up to the witness chair, please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. That microphone does adjust.
I think it's pretty good, actually. All right. Thank you.
Perfect. Mr. Terry, you may proceed.
Yes, good afternoon, Ms. Bell. Could you please tell the jury your name, spell your last name for the court reporter?
My name is Connie Bell. Last name is Bell.
And where are you employed, Ms. Bell?
I'm employed at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement here in Tampa in the digital evidence section.
And how long have you been working there?
I've been working at FDLE since 2005, but I've been in the digital evidence section since 2009.
What's your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Florida in anthropology and a master's degree from the University of Central Florida in digital forensics.
Do you partake in any training with FDLE following your employment?
When I began my work in the digital evidence section, I had to complete a roughly year-long training program at FDLE, which is an internal training program that also includes external training classes that I was required to attend. Throughout the first phase, I had to perform a series of readings, written assessments, practical assessments, hands-on exercises, and then I had to complete an oral board. At that point, I was allowed to proceed to phase 2, which consisted of supervised casework, where I was working actual cases under the supervision of a qualified analyst at the time. And upon completing that phase, I had to complete a mock trial. And at that point, I began independent casework in 2010, July 2010.
Do you have any continuing education requirements as new technology develops?
We don't have formal requirements from FDLE. However, I have several certifications that do require continuing education requirements. And I do attend training as often as I can, frankly, but it depends on, the last one I went to was actually, I believe, early last year, and that was a class here in Orlando for vehicle forensics. However, I also participate in the Scientific Working Group for Digital Evidence. I'm a member of the Quality Assurance Committee on that particular organization, and we meet 3 times annually, so I also am able to keep current on things with that as well.
What are your duties and responsibilities on a day-to-day basis as a digital forensic analyst?
My job is to examine items of evidence that might store information that could be relevant in a criminal investigation, and it has to be anything really that stores electronic data. So it could be cell phones, it could be laptops, could be gaming consoles, or of course computers, and we also do the card skimmers from gas pumps and ATMs as well.
Is the lab you work for, are they accredited?
We are accredited. We are accredited to the ISO 17025 requirements. That's an international standard, and we are accredited by the, now it is the American National Standards Institute National Accreditation Board.
And what does being accredited mean?
Accreditation involves, first off, as I mentioned, assuring that we have an outside body come in and assess whether or not we are following those international standards. And then, in addition, they check to make sure we're following our own standards. I've heard it described as sort of a cake, and we have the bottom cake, a layer of the cake is the international standards from ISO. Then the next layer is the accrediting body's own special standards for forensic science laboratories. So that's what the accrediting body will enforce on us. And then we have the sprinkles on top, which are the requirements we impose on ourselves. And they check to make sure we're following all of those. So I believe they just came in and did our assessment in May for reaccreditation this year. And I believe it was over 1,500 standards they evaluate us against. And we successfully did complete reaccreditation this year.
Have you testified in court before regarding your work in digital evidence and forensics?
I have.
Right. Have you been qualified as an expert in that field?
I have.
Judge, at this time I'll pass the witness for any questions.
No question.
You may proceed.
You started to say this a few moments ago, but tell us what sort of evidence you analyze and work with on a regular basis.
It really runs the gamut because people use electronic items all the time in their daily life, including when they are involved in a criminal offense or the victim of a criminal offense. So we get a lot of cell phones right now. We also get laptop computers and gaming consoles and GPS devices, digital cameras, thumb drives, external hard drives, anything that can store information like that.
Okay. How do you go about analyzing these items? What do you do?
Step one, I'm going to look at the package, make sure it's intact, nothing's broken or no seals have been compromised. I want to make sure that it's tamper evident so I can tell that nothing's been allowed to leave that package without anyone knowing. And then I'll look and make sure that the contents of the package match what the submission documentation indicates it's supposed to be. So I want to make sure I open that package and I don't find an iPhone when they say it's supposed to be a laptop, something like that. And after that, I will proceed to inventory the items, see what I can actually examine. So, for example, some items might have removable media in them, like a digital camera, might have its own internal storage, but it might also have a card, a memory card in it that I'll analyze separately. So then I'll preserve the evidence first. So what I try to do, because we want to mitigate any potential risk of altering or damaging or the evidence. So the first step I'll do is try to preserve it. I'll try to make a working copy of that item's memory, and I'll do all of my searches and any other analyses on the copy that I've created.
All right. Were you involved in the investigation in the case of Nicole Nachtman?
I was.
Right. And specifically, were you given any particular piece of evidence and asked to download it?
I was given several pieces. Should I refer to the notes?
If you need to, yes. Sure.
Okay. There were multiple submissions on this case.
Okay.
The most recent item I've worked on was a Garmin Nuvi 2557 LMT GPS device.
Okay, and I want to talk about that particular device if we can for right now. Where did you receive that item?
I checked it out from our evidence intake section in the lab.
And how does the process generally work in getting you the item?
Well, when the item is submitted by the agency who submitted it, which in this case was Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, it gets a unique barcode and a unique identifier, in other words, an item number. And then the paperwork goes to my supervisor, who then assigns the case to me, and I'll just sign up to check it out from the evidence section at the appointed time, and they scan the item to me. I enter my password, and they enter their password to transfer the item to me, and that's that.
All right. And you described this as a Garmin GPS, is that what you said? Or?
It is a Garmin GPS.
Right. And what condition was the Garmin GPS when you received it?
Let's see. I just have it documented as the GPS with the charging cable that plugs into the car cigarette outlet or charging outlet.
And was it broken or was it anything like that?
It was functional.
What did you do when you first received it into your custody?
After inventorying and documenting the contents of the package, then I noticed that there is a card reader slot, but there was nothing in there, so I didn't have to worry about examining another item, just the GPS. And at that point, I tried to use some specialized forensic software that we have in the laboratory to acquire the content of that GPS device. And I couldn't get two things to recognize it, but then I was able to connect it to a computer via a write blocker, which is exactly what it sounds like. It just blocks any attempts to write to the device. And I was able to acquire the full content of that GPS device's internal memory. And once I had that, then I was able to use the forensic software tools to review the content of the device's memory. And I was able to look at the files and parse out the location history and all of that information that a GPS device has.
Right. I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 47 for identification and ask you if you can take a look at this envelope. Do you recognize the envelope in any way?
I do. It has the barcode I mentioned. This is the FDLE laboratory barcode here. And it also has my initials and date, as well as the case number and item number.
All right. If you wouldn't mind, can you open that up and take a look inside without pulling it out?
Sure. It appears to still be the same GPS device and the DC charging cable as well.
Does it appear to be the Garmin device or the GPS device that you downloaded in this particular case?
That's correct.
Now explain the process of your analysis of this item.
Well, after I created that working copy, I backed that up, so I made sure I have a backup of it, so I burned that to a disk, and then I put that GPS back in the original packaging, and that way it's not going to be interacted with, no risk of altering anything on there. Then I used a program called Cellbrite, and I also used another program called Blackthorn. And both of these particular programs were able to pull out both the file system that was present on the GPS and pull out the various track logs or waypoints, which in other words are the series of points that the GPS device has recorded. And each of those has a timestamp associated with it. And they were able to parse that information out. I then generated reports from both programs containing that information for the investigator to review. And I put those on a disk for return to the submitting agency.
So what type of evidence or data is stored on a GPS generally?
Well, the whole point of the thing is to navigate to places. So it's going to have information on the location of the GPS device at particular times. And in some cases, it's such a series of points that are so closely together in time, it actually will trace a route. And those are recorded in the GPS. It calls it track logs, or maybe journeys and other models, things like that.
It doesn't do it by latitude and longitude, or how does it determine the location?
The GPS itself?
Yes.
Well, it uses satellites that are orbiting the Earth all the time, which are the Global Positioning System satellites, which is what GPS stands for. And by obtaining information on how far away it is from, say, 3 of those satellites or 4 of those satellites, it knows exactly where it is. So it's like, for example, if I said, from where I'm sitting right here, I'm this many feet from this corner, and that many feet from corner 2, and that many feet from corner 3, and you drew a circle around each of those at roughly at the distance I said, they would all intersect at one point, and that's where I would be. It would be right here. And that's what the GPS device is doing. And the clocks, it's doing it by measuring the time that it takes the signal to get from the satellite to the GPS unit, or vice versa. It's so accurate that it actually pinpoints the location, typically within a range of 3 to 5 to 10 meters at most. Now, depending on if it loses one of the satellites at one of the times, it might be a little bit off on a point or two here and there, but typically it's very accurate.
How long did it take you to extract the data in this case?
The actual extraction process is typically not that lengthy, no more than minutes to hours. In this case, I was able to complete all of my work on it. I started it on March 29th and I finished it on April 9th.
How does the data look once it's extracted?
Initially, it just looks like a series of files. So if you were looking at it in Windows Explorer, there would be a folder for, it has its own folders and files within those folders. It's very much, it's got its own file system, so it's going to look like that. However, the special software that we use is actually going to pull out information on the locations that were saved to that GPS device. So, and those, it actually groups it. There's a location, and you can view it by day. You can view it by a date range if you want. And in fact, in this particular case, I was asked to provide 2 additional reports highlighting a specific date range. So the date range I was asked for was August 13th through August 27th. So I provided additional reports that contain just the locations from those dates.
All right. And is there a way to take that data and put it onto a map to view it so that people can understand it?
Yes. So the GPS locations with their timestamps are saved in the GPS device as a GPX file, which is basically a text-based file that you could read it, just it would be very cumbersome. However, if you want to see it on a map, you can convert that information to what is called a KML file, and that file you can load into Google Earth, which will then plot the points on a map.
Showing you what's been marked as States Exhibits number 55A through L, and ask you if you can take a look at those and see if you recognize what those are.
These appear to be the plotted points for certain days. August 19th, August 20th, and August 21st of 2015.
Now, do the plotted points, do they give a date and time stamp as to where or when that person or that GPS is at that particular location?
They do.
Okay. And do those pictures fairly and accurately represent how it looks like when you extract the data and you place it onto a Google Earth map?
Yes.
Judge, move to have States Exhibits 55A through L admitted into evidence.
No objection.
They'll be admitted.
Starting off with 55A, that's an example. Okay, so what are we looking at here, if you can please explain to the jury?
These are locations that were recovered from the GPS device plotted onto Google Earth, and they all appear to date from August 19th, 2015.
All right. And with these locations, it appears to be in various areas of the city of Tampa. Would these locations indicate locations where that GPS was located on those specific times during that day?
Yes.
In 55B, this is a more, I guess, zoomed in view of a specific street in Tampa, correct?
Yes.
And again, it gives dates and times. Would that again indicate that the GPS was at that location at those dates and times?
Yes, that's correct. And this is in local time.
Okay. And explain what that means in local time.
You'll notice next to the timestamps there's a UTC -4. So UTC, or some people think of it as Greenwich Mean Time, it's the Universal Coordinated Time. So we're here in our time zone, in the Eastern time zone, we're at daylight. So we're 4 hours back right now, Eastern Daylight Time from UTC. So that's why it says UTC -4. If this had been in January, it would be Standard Time, and it would be UTC -5. But it's August, so.
All right. And then in 55C, it's another map, another location, again, given the dates of 8/19. And we've already discussed that. Right in this location here, it is showing a pinpoint of 8/19 at 3:14:55 p.m. at this particular location. So that would mean that that GPS was somewhere either, you said, within around 10 meters of that location, right around 3:15 p.m.?
That's correct.
And this seems to be the same location, however the dates are different. Would that be accurate?
That's correct, although I guess this is a more zoomed out view.
More zoomed out view, correct. And this is on August 20th of 2015, correct?
Correct.
And again, all of these pin marks are locations where that GPS was receiving the signal and would show that's where it was at that particular time and location.
That's correct.
Now, can you actually follow, say, where a GPS is moving by looking at the pin locations and the times that are on it?
That's not always the case with all GPS devices, but with these particular models, with the Garmin devices, they capture a location sometimes every few seconds. And so it's actually extremely detailed in terms of, so you could use it to estimate, show movement. You can even estimate speed.
So, for instance, in this particular evidence mark, or it's 55E, we have a pinprick right here at 5:43:05 p.m. on August 20th. And then at 5:43:25, it's moved over here. And then at 5:43:51, it's down here. At 5:44:02, it's over here. So as a sequential, you can pretty much determine from that this is the direction of the travel of the vehicle, correct?
That's correct.
And then again with 55F, following the same pinpricks, we see at 8/20/2015 at 5:49:38, the vehicle was located here, the GPS was located here.
Correct.
And then at 5:51:20, it's down here. And then at 5:52:51, it's over here. Would that be accurate based on what I'm showing you here?
That appears correct.
Now, does the Garmin GPS, when the car is not on or when the Garmin GPS is not activated, is it constantly running or does it stop sending signals or receiving signals?
It has to be on to be receiving signals. So if you turn the car off and you turn the GPS device off, it's not recording anything.
All right. So on this location here, at 8/20/2015, the latest timestamp we see is 5:53:02. However, then later we see at 10:19:46 p.m. and then at 10:19:41 p.m. So between those two times, does it appear that it was in the same location, it just was off and then was turned back on?
Those are the two times that appeared for, there was nothing in between there. So presumably it was off and not recording, and then same location, it came on again hours later and began recording again.
Okay. And then 55G, we see here, that's the 8/20/2015, 10:24, 8/20/2015, 10:27, these are all PM times. 8/20/2015, 10:35. So we can track the path of travel of that GPS in the evening hours or the nighttime hours of 8/20/2015, as it appears to be getting on 275. Would that be accurate?
It appears correct.
Okay. And then with Google Earth, you can zoom out and zoom in on the location. So in 55H, what would this be here?
This appears to be a selection of points from a zoomed out view in Google Earth depicting travel northbound on I-75.
Right. And we see up here at 11:43:48 p.m. it's located, or at least the GPS is sending a signal from somewhere near Ocala.
Correct. It's recorded a location near Ocala.
55I. What do we appear to be looking at here?
This appears to be a location, it looks like it's probably a rest stop off a highway, perhaps, but it's from August 21st, 2015.
All right. And we see a time there of August 21st, 2015 at 12:39 a.m. And then from roughly the same location, we see another time of 2:09:43 a.m. and then 2:10:47 a.m. So would that be another indication of a time when the GPS might have been off for a while?
That would be consistent with that type of information.
And then in 55J, again, we're looking at August 21st, correct?
Yes, that appears correct.
All right. And what are we seeing here?
These appear to be points that starts earlier on August 21st. Down here, it looks like at roughly 12 a.m.-ish in the southern part of the screen here, and proceeding north on 75 and then west on Interstate 10. And it looks like roughly 8:25 or so in the morning, the points appear to stop.
And where do they appear to stop at? Can you tell from this map?
Unfortunately, I drive that way multiple times a year, so it looks Tallahassee-ish to me. I mean, I love Tallahassee, don't get me wrong. It's just a long drive.
And then in 55K, what are we looking at here?
That appears to be Interstate 10. I'm not sure where Twin Rivers State Forest is, but it's also August 21st. Looks like around 7 in the morning.
Okay. And so, but we see here at the one side of this map, it's saying 3:22, and then it comes to 3:24 a.m.
Okay. I can see the 3:24. I can't see the 3:22, but
Okay, 3:24 a.m. And then it looks like it starts up again around 7:18 a.m. And then we have over here 7:21 a.m. Would that be accurate?
yes.
And then finally with 55L, we see on this map stating Florida State University, and the latest time we see on here, what would be the latest time you see on there?
I believe the latest one I see is 8:42 a.m. on August 21st, 2015.
Was there any data collected after that time?
I'd have to double check the full report, but that's not. I'm not sure. I don't know it right off the top of my head, but I don't believe there was anything significant after that.
Did the data show at any time the car leaving Tallahassee after that? Jeff, I may have one moment.
Yes.
Jeff, pass witness.
All right, cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Ms. Bell.
Good afternoon.
So I understand the way this GPS device works is if it's plugged into the cigarette lighter, it's recording data or points of movement.
Well, it's battery operated, so it technically doesn't have to be plugged in. You can turn it on without having it plugged in, and as long as the battery is charged, it will still capture its location, provided it can get a signal.
So if I have it in the cigarette lighter and the car turns on, it's going to automatically charge up.
Not guaranteed. It just depends on the model. I'd have to double check. But if it's recording, it is certainly on.
So you would have to manually turn the device on. This isn't one of those GPSs that come with the car that are on your screen. This is a manual, kind of like a detachable system where you can take it out of the car and put it in the car.
Yes, it is removable. You can take it out of the car.
As far as the movements and the maps that Mr. Terry just showed you, you do not show any movement to Tallahassee according to that GPS device until August 21st of 2015, correct?
Well, there were numerous points of locations that were recovered from the device that predate that time frame. So I can't rule out that it traveled before August 21st to Tallahassee.
I'm talking about
but
that week of
for that
August 19th.
range, that 19th through the 21st, correct. I believe those dates were the only dates associated with Tallahassee, August 21st.
Even going back the 18th or the 17th. There was no movement to Tallahassee until August 21st, which is where the GPS device ends and there's no more data after that.
I don't recall what was on the 17th or 18th, but I'd have to look at the actual reports.
Do you have it in front of you?
But I do not. Unfortunately, they're very numerous, so they're not printable. And I mean very numerous, like thousands. So it's not a printable report, but it is on, I have it on a disk here that I could look at in my case file, but I don't have the means of doing it at the moment.
But as far as the maps that Mr. Terry showed you in the exhibits, which I believe his exhibits begin on the 19th and end with the 21st, you see no movement to Tallahassee except on the 21st in the early morning hours as it's going up I-75 and ends on the 21st. I believe he said 8 something in the morning.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
I don't have any other questions.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused by the state
Yes, Your Honor.
and by the defense?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. You may be excused as a witness at this time.
Thank you.
And yes, ladies and gentlemen, Jerry, I am going to give you a break now. It is 3:30 exactly. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Please do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Please do not do any research related to the case, and please avoid any exposure to the case outside of the courtroom. All rise for the jury. Jury has exited. Everyone may be seated. Just for timing purposes, state where are we at with witnesses? Who do you expect to call next? I want to be able to tell them. I don't mind going late tonight, but I want to be able to tell them when they come back that we plan on going past 5 o'clock, 5:30 maybe.
Judge, the state has 2 more witnesses left.
Okay.
But they're both probably pretty lengthy.
Okay.
Our next witness is going to be Detective Messer, and my guess is he'll probably take us up to 5.
He's
I
the
don't-
lead detective.
He's the lead detective. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Take you up to 5 in direct, or take us up to 5
between
total?
direct and cross. Between direct and cross, I think it might take the rest of the
Well,
day.
that would just leave then one witness if we
Correct.
came back tomorrow.
Correct, Judge. What I'm concerned is...
Well, we're coming back tomorrow anyway, but I mean come back to the
No,
state
I understand, but since they're both lengthy, I don't know that we can fit them both in.
Right.
I mean, unless we stay till maybe 7 o'clock.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do
Okay.
that. I'm not going to do that to them. They're working hard. They've been here since 9 o'clock this morning. So that's fine. That's perfect, actually. So let's finish that next witness and see where we're at. If for some reason we get done early and we want to go another half hour, would you mind starting the next witness?
Not at all, Judge.
Okay.
He's here, he's available.
All right,
so we can do that.
let's plan that then. Let's see when we finish this next witness, see how much time we have, and maybe get them started.
Okay.
All right, have a nice break.